The underestimated Earth. The alien coalition had been preparing for months. Deep in the darkness of space, hundreds of ships, powered by advanced technology, waited for the signal to move. Their mission was simple: conquer Earth, take its resources, and enslave its people. For the alien races, Earth was nothing more than a tiny speck in the vastness of the galaxy, a world that had barely advanced past the age of war and greed. To them, humans were primitive beings, struggling to survive in a world that was always on the brink of destruction. They believed Earth was ripe for invasion. Admiral Zor, the leader of the alien forces, studied the maps and reports with a cold smile. "This is going to be easy," he muttered to his officers, his voice filled with confidence. "Humanity hasn't even mastered space travel. How could they possibly put up a fight?" The alien coalition had been gathering intel on Earth for years. They knew the humans had weapons, guns, missiles, and fighter jets. But these were nothing compared to the destructive power of their own fleets. Earth's military forces were spread thin, and its leaders constantly bickered among themselves. There was no unity, no coordinated defense. It seemed as though the planet had been forgotten, ignored by the other civilizations in the galaxy. Earth was far from being a threat. With the plan set in motion, the aliens began their descent toward Earth. Massive ships filled with soldiers and advanced weapons moved into position, ready to strike. As their ships entered the atmosphere, the leaders of the alien forces laughed, sure that this would be the easiest conquest they'd ever undertake. The humans wouldn't stand a chance. But what the aliens didn't know was that Earth was not as defenseless as they thought. Despite their struggles, the humans had something the aliens had completely underestimated: the strength of their will to survive. They had faced challenges before: wars, famines, pandemics, and each time they had managed to pull through. The human spirit was something the aliens hadn't even considered. As the first alien ships entered Earth's orbit, the planet's leaders were caught off guard. Governments scrambled to form a plan, but they were disorganized, fractured by years of division. It seemed that all hope was lost. Yet, in the chaos, something incredible happened. A small group of human scientists and military leaders, realizing the threat, began working together in secret to develop a counterattack. They had no choice but to act quickly. Earth's future depended on it. In the heart of the world's largest cities, resistance movements began to form. Soldiers, civilians, and scientists joined forces. They knew they didn't stand a chance against the aliens' advanced technology, but they were determined to fight back. The first step was to get their hands on any alien technology they could, hoping to reverse engineer it and find a weakness. As the first shots were fired, the alien ships released their destructive weapons. Cities were leveled in a matter of hours. Earth's defenses, outdated and weak compared to the alien fleet, were almost immediately overwhelmed. But humanity refused to give up. Despite the overwhelming odds, they fought back with everything they had, using every tool at their disposal. The initial resistance was chaotic, but it wasn't without purpose. It bought the humans just enough time to prepare for the next phase of their defense. Deep in a hidden underground bunker, a team of human engineers worked around the clock. They knew they had little time before the aliens would strike again, so they pushed themselves to the limit. Their mission was to build a weapon that could stop the alien ships. It was a dangerous gamble, but they had no other choice. The weapon they were creating was a prototype, a massive energy cannon capable of disabling the alien ship shields. While the weapon was being built, General Kate, a fierce and determined military leader, took charge of Earth's remaining forces. She coordinated the troops, organizing guerrilla-style attacks on the alien invaders. These attacks were small, hit-and-run tactics, designed to weaken the enemy's hold on the planet. They couldn't afford a full-scale battle yet, but every small victory counted. General Kate knew that the longer they could keep the aliens occupied, the better the chances they would have of turning the tide. Meanwhile, Admiral Zor watched the destruction unfold from his flagship. He saw the humans fighting back, but to him, It was nothing more than a nuisance. The aliens had superior weapons, superior numbers, and the best technology in the galaxy. These primitive humans, with their basic guns and planes, could never hope to defeat them. The Admiral's confidence was unshaken. Earth would soon fall, and its resources would belong to the aliens. However, a nagging feeling began to grow in Admiral Zor's mind. The humans, while seemingly weak, were showing something that the aliens hadn't anticipated. They were relentless. They didn't fear death, and they fought with an intensity the alien forces had never encountered. It was an unexpected challenge, but Zor quickly dismissed the thought. He was certain that once his forces got organized, the humans would be crushed. But deep down, even Zor began to wonder, was there something more to this planet than the aliens had initially thought? The first wave of destruction hit Earth's major cities, but there was no time to mourn the loss of life. As the alien ships hovered overhead, human forces were forced to retreat into underground bunkers, leaving the cities to burn. But this was only the beginning. Despite the overwhelming odds, something incredible was beginning to happen. Humans were uniting. And as the humans regrouped, their resilience began to shine. They were far from defeated. Little did the alien invaders know, their underestimation of Earth was about to be their biggest mistake. As the alien ships continued to rain destruction upon Earth's cities, a sense of urgency gripped humanity. The first wave of attacks had decimated entire regions, leaving entire populations scattered, wounded, and disoriented. But as chaos consumed the world, a new force began to emerge, one that the invaders never expected. Humanity's greatest strength, its resilience, was being tested in ways no one could have imagined. In the midst of the burning cities and crumbling governments, pockets of resistance began to form. It was not an organized army at first, but ordinary civilians, engineers, and military veterans who had survived the initial wave of attacks. They had witnessed the destruction firsthand, felt the shockwaves of alien weaponry, and seen the lives of their loved ones torn apart. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming adversity, they refused to surrender. General Kate, who had once been a low-ranking officer in the global military force, now found herself leading the remnants of Earth's fighting forces. She knew that the alien invaders were not invincible, but they were powerful and Earth's defenses were ill-prepared for an assault of this magnitude. Yet she saw something in the eyes of her fellow soldiers, a fire that she hadn't seen in a long time. It was the same fire that had driven humans to survive countless hardships throughout history. They would fight, not just for survival, but for the future of their planet. Kate's team quickly mobilized, regrouping the scattered forces and organizing guerrilla-style strikes against the alien invaders. The small resistance groups, while lacking advanced technology, were not without resourcefulness. They used the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and launching surprise attacks on the alien forces. Every small victory, every skirmish won, added to their morale. They had no grand strategy, just a single burning desire to protect their homes, their families, and their way of life. The aliens, still convinced of their superiority, continued to press forward. Admiral Zor was growing frustrated, but he remained confident in the outcome of the invasion. The resistance, he thought, was nothing more than a nuisance. The aliens had seen it all before. Small rebellions from primitive species, crushed underfoot by the might of their advanced weaponry. Zor had no idea what he was about to face. Back on Earth, the tide was slowly beginning to turn. A group of scientists who had initially been researching space travel and advanced energy sources for peaceful purposes now found themselves caught in a race against time. Realizing that Earth's military was ill-equipped to handle the alien forces, they began working in secret to develop weapons capable of taking down the alien ships. The key, they believed, lay in the alien technology they had captured during the initial skirmishes. It wasn't easy. The alien tech was sophisticated and unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. But these scientists, driven by the need to protect their planet, worked tirelessly, using their knowledge of engineering and physics to reverse engineer the alien technology. It was a slow process, but with each passing day, they made progress. They built prototypes of weapons capable of disabling the alien ship's energy shields. The problem, however, was finding a way to deliver those weapons effectively. As the scientists worked, General Kate continued to lead her resistance forces, launching hit-and-run tactics against the alien invaders. While the humans were no match for the aliens' firepower, they had the advantage of familiarity with their own world. They knew the land, the cities, and the underground bunkers. The alien invaders, on the other hand, were unfamiliar with the planet and its terrain. The humans used this to their advantage, constantly outmaneuvering the alien soldiers and striking when they least expected it. But every victory, no matter how small, came at a cost. Human casualties were mounting. Every resistance group that launched an attack was met with retaliation from the aliens. Entire cities were leveled, and entire neighborhoods were wiped out. Yet, even in the face of such devastation, the human spirit remained unbroken. Families rebuilt, survivors mourned their losses, and new resistance fighters joined the cause. Meanwhile, Admiral Zor's confidence was starting to waver. The humans were not behaving like any species he had ever encountered. They fought with a fierce determination that the aliens had not expected. The invaders had always relied on their technological superiority to crush their enemies, but Earth's inhabitants were proving to be a much harder target than anticipated. One of the most surprising developments was the human response to the alien weaponry. As the humans began to understand the alien technology, they started using it against the invaders. It wasn't just about fighting with guns and missiles anymore. Humans were now using their enemies' own technology to defend their planet. In a way, the aliens had unknowingly taught Earth how to fight back more effectively. But the key to humanity's survival was still locked behind a single untested weapon, the energy cannon. Built by the engineers and scientists working in secret, this prototype had the potential to level the playing field against the alien fleet. But there was a problem. It had never been tested in real combat, and no one knew if it would even work. The scientists knew it was their last hope, and as the cannon was moved into position, the tension was palpable. Admiral Zor, still convinced that the humans would soon crumble, continued to lead his forces in their invasion. He saw the resistance as nothing more than a nuisance, a small fire that would be easily extinguished once his fleet tightened its grip around Earth. However, there was something he wasn't seeing, a growing force beneath the surface of this tiny planet. The alien fleet was vast, but humanity had something that the invaders couldn't measure: heart. And it was that heart that would change everything. As Earth's forces prepared to launch their first major counterattack, the world held its breath. The battle was far from over, and the future of humanity was still uncertain. But one thing was clear: Earth was not as weak as the aliens had thought, and the fight for survival had only just begun. The days following the initial counterattacks were filled with an intensity that neither side had anticipated. Earth's resistance was growing stronger, not because of advanced technology or superior firepower, but because of a singular quality that humans had always relied on: their relentless will to survive. The aliens, who had expected an easy victory, were now facing something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. General Kate stood on the rooftop of a crumbling skyscraper in what remained of New York City, her eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of movement. The city, once a bustling metropolis, now looked like a war zone. Smoke billowed from the ruins of buildings, and fires were still burning in several areas. Yet despite the destruction, the survivors were determined to rebuild and fight back. Kate's soldiers were not the well-equipped military units they had once been. They were civilians, engineers, farmers, doctors, teachers, ordinary people who had been thrown into an extraordinary situation. They didn't have advanced alien technology or powerful weapons at their disposal, but they had something far more potent. They had each other. The soldiers relied on the bonds they had formed during the past weeks of fighting. They knew that the only way to win was by working together, using their intelligence and resourcefulness to outwit the aliens. "We can't keep this up forever," said Lieutenant Harris, a young officer who had quickly risen to the ranks of Kate's inner circle. "Our supplies are running low. If we don't find a way to take down one of those ships, we won't have a chance." Kate turned to Harris, her face set with determination. "We don't need to take down a ship. We just need to survive long enough to hit them where it hurts." The aliens, she knew, had underestimated humanity's resilience. The resistance movements were growing more organized. The resistance fighters were not only learning to use the aliens' own weapons against them, but they were also coming up with new tactics that the invaders hadn't prepared for. In every battle, the humans were adapting, finding new ways to outsmart the alien forces. The aliens had initially thought that they could crush the resistance with sheer force, but they were learning the hard way that Earth's population wasn't going to give up easily. The initial strike had taken humanity by surprise, but now, the aliens were the ones who were surprised. They hadn't anticipated humans using their own weapons against them or employing guerrilla tactics so effectively. It wasn't just about advanced technology. It was about the sheer willpower that humans had to survive. Admiral Zor, the alien commander overseeing the invasion, had begun to notice the shift in the battlefield. His fleet, while superior in numbers and technology, was facing increasingly difficult challenges. Human tactics were unconventional and unpredictable. Every time they thought they had the upper hand, humans would strike back with a ferocity that left them reeling. Zor had expected to crush the human resistance in a matter of weeks, but here they were nearly a month into the invasion, and the humans were still fighting. Worse yet, their attacks were beginning to show signs of success. The alien commander paced in his command ship, his thoughts racing. He had studied many species during his career as a military strategist, and he had never encountered one like humanity. These humans were different, tenacious, creative, and stubborn. Zor's mind raced with questions. What made them so determined? How were they managing to turn the tide of battle? And most importantly, what were they planning next? In the heart of the resistance, General Kate's strategy was beginning to take shape. The humans had managed to capture several pieces of alien technology during the initial skirmishes, and while they lacked the knowledge to fully understand it, they had learned enough to reverse engineer it. The scientists working under Kate's command had made significant progress. They had figured out how to disable the energy shields that protected the alien ships, which had been humanity's biggest obstacle. The energy shields, which were almost invulnerable to human weapons, were now vulnerable to a new type of pulse weapon designed specifically to disrupt the shield's electromagnetic field. The first successful test of the pulse weapon was a moment of celebration. The scientists had worked for days, calibrating and fine-tuning the weapon. It wasn't perfect, but it was effective enough to disable the shields of a small alien fighter. When the pulse weapon fired, the alien ship's energy shield flickered, then collapsed entirely. The alien ship was left exposed, vulnerable to human firepower. "It worked," shouted one of the engineers, his voice filled with disbelief and excitement. "We can take them down. We can actually fight back." Kate's heart raced as she watched the test video. The results were exactly what they had hoped for. They now had a weapon that could level the playing field. The humans no longer had to rely on hit-and-run tactics alone. They could stand toe-to-toe with the alien invaders. But the victory was bittersweet. General Kate knew that the aliens wouldn't take this defeat lying down. They would adapt, just as the humans had. The aliens would soon figure out how to counter the pulse weapon, and humanity's advantage would be short-lived unless they were prepared for the next phase of the battle. "We need to move fast," Kate said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "We can't let them catch up. We strike hard, we strike fast, and we keep them on the defensive. This is our chance." Kate's forces had limited resources, and they had to act quickly. The pulse weapon, while effective, was still a prototype. There weren't enough of them to launch a full-scale attack on the alien fleet, but Kate had a plan. She knew that the key to victory wasn't just the weapon. It was the element of surprise. The humans had already shown that they could outmaneuver the aliens, and now it was time to push that advantage to the limit. As Kate prepared for the next wave of attacks, the alien forces were already beginning to regroup. Zor had ordered his fleet to tighten their formation, anticipating another round of surprise assaults. But what Zor didn't know was that the humans were already one step ahead. Earth's resistance wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to win. The battle for Earth was far from over, and as the humans readied themselves for the next phase of the fight, both sides knew that everything would come down to the next few days. The aliens had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they were about to pay the price. The days following the successful trial of the pulse weapon were filled with tension and excitement. General Kate and her team knew that this was their opportunity to finally shift the momentum of the war. The aliens, despite their advanced technology and overwhelming forces, were now vulnerable in ways they had never expected. Humanity had discovered a weakness, and they were going to exploit it to the fullest. Kate stood in the war room, staring at the large holographic map of the Earth and the surrounding space. The alien ships, once scattered in different regions, had now begun to cluster together, possibly in an attempt to reorganize. It was a strategic mistake, one that would soon prove to be their undoing. The aliens had underestimated just how fast humanity could adapt. "Status update," Kate said, her voice calm but firm as she addressed her officers. Lieutenant Harris, who had been working tirelessly alongside the engineers to perfect the pulse weapon, looked up from his console. "We've managed to replicate the pulse weapon, but we're still low on supplies. We can't build them fast enough for a full-scale attack. But we do have enough to hit a few key targets, and we can target their weaker ships first." Kate nodded. They had to hit hard and fast, aiming for the alien ships that were most vulnerable to their new weapon. The key was to catch them off guard before they could figure out how to adapt to the pulse weapon. The alien forces were regrouping, which meant they were preparing for something big. But what they didn't know was that the humans were already preparing for a fight on an entirely different level. "We're going to hit them at the heart of their fleet," Kate declared, her voice filled with conviction. "We can't waste time. Every second we delay gives them the chance to recover. We have to act now." Her team immediately got to work, preparing for the strike. Ships were readied, the pulse weapons were loaded, and the resistance fighters, who had once been civilians, were now a well-trained force, ready to fight. Even as they prepped their ships, there was an underlying sense of urgency. They had one chance to catch the aliens off guard before they figured out how to counteract the pulse weapon. In space, the alien fleet was tightening its formation, preparing for a counteroffensive. Admiral Zor stood in his command center aboard the largest alien vessel, watching the holographic displays of Earth's resistance forces. The humans had been resilient, but their tactics were nothing compared to the full might of the alien fleet. Zor was confident that he could crush their resistance, but he wasn't going to underestimate them again. The time for carelessness had passed. "Prepare the fleet," Zor ordered, his voice cold and calculated. "We end this now." He was determined to finish what he had started. The humans had surprised him with their adaptability, but now, with his fleet fully prepared, he believed the war would be over soon. However, what Zor didn't realize was that he was about to walk straight into the most dangerous trap yet, one that was being set by the very species he had underestimated. Kate and her forces had launched their attack, focusing on the outer rim of the alien fleet. The pulse weapons were effective, cutting through the alien ship's energy shields with ease. The humans, with their new tactics, had turned the tide in their favor. They struck fast, each attack hitting with precision, taking down one alien vessel after another. The Resistance's strategy was simple: get in, hit hard, and get out before the enemy could retaliate. The alien ships, disoriented and scrambling to regroup, began to falter. Zor's confidence quickly turned to frustration. The humans weren't just fighting, they were winning. The pulse weapons had proven to be far more effective than Zor had anticipated, and his fleet was starting to lose ships faster than he could replace them. "What is happening?" Zor demanded, his frustration building. "Why can't we stop them?" One of his officers stepped forward, his voice filled with disbelief. "Sir, the humans have developed a new weapon. It's capable of disabling our energy shields. They're using it to strike us from a distance, and we can't block their attacks." Zor's mind raced. This was no ordinary resistance. The humans had come up with a weapon that he had never encountered before, and it was turning the tide of the war in their favor. But Zor wasn't the type to panic. He quickly formulated a plan. "Shut down the shields on all ships," Zor ordered. "We'll sacrifice some of the fleet, but we'll regroup and focus all our firepower on Earth's cities. If we can't win the war, we'll at least make them pay for their defiance." But as he issued the order, Zor couldn't help but feel a nagging sense of doubt. He had underestimated the humans, and now it seemed that they were outsmarting him at every turn. The humans had taken the first punch, and now the aliens were on the defensive. But there was still time to turn the situation around. Or so Zor thought. Back on Earth, Kate and her team were preparing for a final decisive strike. They had inflicted serious damage on the alien fleet, but they couldn't afford to slow down now. The next phase of the battle was about to begin, and Kate knew that this could be their only chance to end the war once and for all. The humans had come a long way since the early days of the invasion. They had fought back with everything they had, using their ingenuity, determination, and the element of surprise to outwit the aliens at every turn. But this battle was different. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about winning. And if they failed, the aliens would come back stronger than ever. As Kate looked out over the war room, she could see the resolve in her soldiers' eyes. They had come together as one united force. And now, with the aliens on the ropes, it was time to finish what they had started. The tide had turned, and the future of Earth would be determined in the coming hours. This was their chance to show the galaxy just how wrong they were about humanity. The next move was critical, and Kate's forces were ready. But as she prepared to strike the final blow, she couldn't help but wonder, had the aliens truly learned their lesson, or would they come back for one final fight that would push humanity to the brink? The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and there was no turning back. As the final phase of the battle loomed closer, the tension was palpable. Earth's forces had dealt a critical blow to the alien fleet, but they knew that the aliens were not easily defeated. Admiral Zor, despite his earlier setbacks, still commanded one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. The humans had the advantage for now, but they had no illusions. The aliens were capable of extraordinary things when cornered, and they had proven that before. In the war room, General Kate paced back and forth, her mind racing with the weight of the decision ahead. Their previous successes had come at a high cost. The pulse weapons, effective as they were still experimental, and there was no guarantee they would work against the remaining alien ships. But they didn't have the luxury of time to develop new technologies. If they didn't strike now, the aliens would regroup, and the war would drag on far longer than they could afford. "We're close," Lieutenant Harris said, his eyes glued to the console in front of him. "But the alien fleet isn't giving up. They're pushing back harder than we expected." Kate stopped in her tracks, looking at the holographic map of the battlefield. The alien ships were beginning to form a new defensive line, focusing all their firepower on Earth's remaining forces. Even though the pulse weapons had incapacitated a large portion of the fleet, the aliens were relentless in their pursuit of victory. They had underestimated the humans once, but that wasn't going to happen again. "We need to hit them with everything we've got," Kate said, her voice resolute. "One final strike. We have no room for mistakes." Her words echoed in the room as the officers around her nodded in agreement. Everyone knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about saving Earth. This was about sending a message to the entire galaxy that humanity was not to be trifled with. They had fought back when they were outmatched. They had adapted when they were cornered. And now, with Earth's fury unleashed, it was time to finish the fight once and for all. The remaining human warships were lined up in space, ready for the final assault. The last pulse weapons were loaded, and the resistance fighters, who had grown from civilians into skilled warriors, stood ready at their posts. Kate looked out at her fleet one last time. It wasn't just a military force. It was a symbol of everything humanity stood for: resilience, ingenuity, and unity. They had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. In the heart of the alien fleet, Admiral Zor was preparing for what he believed would be the final battle. His ships were in a defensive formation, and all their remaining firepower was focused on Earth's warships. But something had changed. The humans were more coordinated than before, more relentless. The pulse weapons had taken their toll, but Zor still believed that they could win. He refused to accept the possibility of defeat. The alien empire was too strong, and the humans too weak. This was simply a temporary setback. "They've thrown everything they have at us," Zor muttered, staring at the chaotic scenes unfolding before him. "But it's not enough. We'll crush them." He was determined to make the humans pay for their audacity. With one last push, Zor intended to wipe Earth's forces from existence. But as he issued the order for his fleet to launch a final devastating strike, he was unaware that his own arrogance was about to cost him everything. The human forces surged forward with terrifying speed. The final assault was underway. The pulse weapons had been upgraded, with new modifications that made them more deadly than ever before. The human warships, once considered primitive, now had the power to cripple the alien ships with a single shot. The element of surprise was no longer on the alien side. The humans had learned to fight their way through the stars, and they were no longer afraid. "Target the central command ship," General Kate ordered, her voice steady but filled with determination. "Take it down, and the rest will fall." The human fleet, using every ounce of strength and strategy they had, launched a series of precise attacks on the alien command ship. Zor's flagship, the heart of the alien fleet, was now their primary target. The pulse weapons hit the ship with devastating force, disabling its shields and cutting through its hull. Alien ships around it faltered, unsure of what was happening. For the first time in the war, the aliens were on the back foot. In the command center of the alien flagship, Zor watched in disbelief as his ship's systems began to fail. The lights flickered, alarms blared, and the once mighty warship started to break apart under the force of the pulse weapons. The humans were relentless, their attacks showing no mercy. Zor barked orders, but it was too late. The tide had turned. "Retreat!" Zor screamed, his voice filled with desperation. "Get us out of here." But it was already too late. The human warships had surrounded the alien fleet, cutting off any chance of escape. The remaining alien ships, damaged and disoriented, tried to regroup, but the humans were too fast, too efficient. They closed in, firing their pulse weapons one last time, taking down alien ship after alien ship. The battle, which had once seemed so hopeless for humanity, was now nearing its end. The alien forces, once so confident in their superiority, were being shattered by the relentless might of Earth's fury. And in the heart of the alien fleet, Zor's flagship finally succumbed to the barrage, its massive form exploding into a brilliant burst of light. With the destruction of the flagship, the rest of the alien fleet began to fall apart. Ships scattered in disarray, their unity broken. The humans had done the impossible. They had not only defended their world, but had struck back with such force that the alien invaders had no choice but to flee. On Earth, the resistance fighters and civilians alike watched the skies in awe. The impossible had become reality. The alien invaders, who had once thought of humans as primitive and easy prey, were now fleeing in defeat. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be underestimated. They had fought for their world and had emerged victorious. As General Kate looked out at the sky, she felt a surge of pride. The battle had been won, but the war had changed humanity forever. They were no longer the weak, defenseless species that the galaxy had once mocked. They had proven that they could stand tall, that they could fight for what was theirs, and that no one, not even the might of an entire galactic empire, could crush their spirit. The galaxy would never forget what happened next, and Earth would remain a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most underestimated species can rise up and change the course of history.